Hello, everyone. Good evening. Thanks a lot for joining us. We're here tonight for our workshop with Dr. David Haase on the COVID-19 vaccine. And we have been looking forward to this conversation since we know that there's lots of questions about the vaccine. And so just to introduce myself, my name is Stacy Gomez. I'm a member of known as Legal Halifax. We're a migrant support organization here in Nova Scotia. And also I'm joined by Dr. David Haase, and I will share a short bio in a bit. But also before I do that, I see that there's people that are tuning in that are starting to join us. So that's great. Just to say, we encourage questions. So feel free to send us your questions on WhatsApp. The number is 902-329-9595. And if you and I are in contact, it's the same number that we will be using to accept questions tonight. Also, we have the option if you would like to call in and ask your question directly to Dr. David Haase. That's something that we're able to do as well. So we definitely encourage you to actively participate in the session. And so, yes, I'm sure that as we go through, others will join in. So just to give a little an introduction to Dr. David Haase. Dr. David Haase hails from Savlamar, Jamaica, went to school in Kingston, and then medical school at the University of the West Indies, UWI. He left Jamaica for further training in 1977 and studied internal medicine and infectious diseases here in Canada. Although now completely retired from clinical practice, he is always concerned about the health of Black people. He is now involved in the COVID-19 vaccine rollout to African Nova Scotians, and we are really, I would say, very happy and feel very appreciative to Dr. Haase for taking the time to be here with us tonight. So with that, I will pass it on to you.
Okay, thank you, Stacy, and greetings to everyone who is on the call. We're not able to see you, but you can see us, and that's great. And for me, it's a real pleasure. I'm really happy to be able to speak with my fellow Jamaicans and others who are there as well. Let me start off very quickly with a story, and you can relate to this. It's a fictitious story, so if I use names of any of you who are on the call, just not you. There are two friends from Jamaica who come up every year to be migrant workers at a farm in Kentville. And this year they're coming up together. One is Joe and one is Hugh. And they're coming up together and, they're talking about this whole COVID and the vaccine. And Joe said, Hugh, man, I'm not going to take that vaccine. I've heard so many bad things about it. I'm just not going to take it. And Hugh said, boy, that is true, but I think that I need to take that vaccine because it's a good thing for me. So they kind of talked back and forth, came up, did their 14 days, and they're in the same kind of grouping together. So they lived in a kind of a small group dwelling. And as soon as Hugh could take the vaccine, he arranged to get registered, took the vaccine, and he was saying, boy, you should, But anyway, he took it, and Joe went on doing his work. And about, a month later, Joe started to feel a little unwell. He developed a little bit of flu-like symptoms, little fever, little chills, got a bit short of breath, and sure enough, had a positive COVID test. And so I'm going to stop that there. It's just a scenario that you have to think about when you think about this whole issue of COVID. And so basically this evening, I'm going to take you on a bus ride from virus to vaccine. And what we're going to do on this bus ride is we're going to take several stops. So we'll stop intermittently, do a little riding, stop, take some questions, and then we'll move on again. So again, just sit back, enjoy the ride, and we'll keep going. Now, I should tell you, for me, this thing they call infectious diseases, a big sort of term, you know. But basically, my life work and the training I did was to take care of people with infections. So any kind of infection, bacterial, viral, anything. So that was what I studied and my life work until I retired from infectious diseases. So again, this is something I've done repeatedly for the African Nova Scotian community, talk about COVID-19 and the vaccine. So again, you know, we're going to talk. You'll have questions. I will answer to the best of my ability. If I do not have all the answers, then I will get the answers. So you just pass them on to Stacy and we'll get the answers for you. So let us start our bus ride. You start out the bus now, everybody buckled in because we use seatbelts here. Let us start the bus ride. Let's talk about the virus. And the key for me is that if you understand the virus and how the virus works, you'll have a better understanding of the vaccine. So I'm going to go through that, walk it through, break it down for you. Hopefully it will be, be able to understand it. And if you have questions, you're not sure, please make sure to ask your questions. This is a good opportunity to get your questions answered. All right. So, COVID-19. So, there's a virus, there's a set of viruses. They call them coronaviruses. Big word. Again, don't worry about the words, right? We're going to break it down. Corona is a Latin word for crown. Anyway, so when you look at the virus, it has these spikes on the surface, a small particle, but under the microscope, you can see these spikes. These are called spike proteins. You'll remember that because we're going to come back to them later on. And this virus was first detected in December 2019. It probably was around before that, but the first cases in humans were reported in December 2019. And so that's how it got the name COVID-19. Coronavirus, V for virus, disease 19. So we call it COVID or COVID-19 for short. And that's what I'll be using all the way through. And as many of you know, March 2020, this COVID was spread throughout many countries in the world and was declared what we call a pandemic. Means it affected a large number of countries, including countries in the Caribbean, Jamaica, including the US, Canada, England, all over the country, all around the world. And then the latest thing now that's happening is that we have these things called variants, and I'm going to break that down for you as we go through. But the key to remember is that this virus that we have now, this COVID virus, it's here to stay. It is here to stay. It's not going to go away soon, right? It's here to stay. It's a very small thing, but it's alive. And basically, you can think about this virus as a genetic material, a code, genetic code in a bag. So it's surrounded by a sack or a bag, and it has genetic material. Now you need to recognize that viruses have two purposes in life, only two. One of them is to get inside of cells, because viruses, yes, they can survive outside of cells for a certain period of time, but boy, they cannot survive for long. And they have to get within cells, inside of cells, to survive. So that's one of their purposes in life, to get into cells. And each virus has specific cells that they want to get into. So that's what we call infection. The other purpose in life is to produce more virus. So when these viruses get into the cells, they produce more viruses. What they do is they take over the cell, and they use each cell as a little factory that makes proteins for the cell and for the body. The virus takes over that factory and makes copies of itself. Each cell makes hundreds of thousands of copies. And then what the virus does, it gets out of that cell. And it may get out of the cell by killing the cell, destroying the cell completely, or it may get out of the cell without destroying the cell. And then all of those copies get out of the cell and then they go into other cells. So you can imagine how many cells can be infected in that way. So that's the two crucial things to remember. And the virus, as I said, has this code. It's a recipe, if you like to use that term. Now, your normal cell does the same thing, but in a different way. So in every cell, there's what we might call a head office, and it's the nucleus of the cell. That's where the kind of brains of the cell is living, and that head office then sends a message to the factory to produce certain proteins whenever it feels that those proteins should be produced. That message, it has a code. It's called messenger RNA. So messenger RNA. And again, that will come up when we talk about the vaccines. But it's a normal thing that your cells do. Send this messenger RNA, this message to the factory to make proteins, and those proteins may stay in the cell or go outside of the cell. Virus comes along and just uses that factor for its own purpose. So again, just remember that. Now, the thing about the COVID-19 virus, that virus, it really is specific for your respiratory cells, the cells in your breathing, the breathing part of your body. So, going back in through your nose and down through your throat and into your lungs, it's very specific for that part of the body. Those cells get infected by this virus, and then the virus makes more virus, and then it can spread from there throughout the rest of the body. It can spread to other organs, the heart, the brain, kidneys, etc. So, there's that you need to know about it. And really and truly, when this virus makes other viral particles, it copies itself in the breathing passages. Those can then travel out in secretion. So this is how it gets out of one human being and into another human being. It travels in the secretions that come out of your breathing passages. Either when you cough, you might sneeze, you might even talk, you might even breathe. Even when you're breathing, those particles are coming out, very tiny particles. And those particles then can be suspended in the air, or they fall within a short distance from the person. But anybody who's around in the distance that those particles are up in the air can then become infected. So these particles can get into your body from another person through your nose or your mouth or your eyes. And that's why we talk about staying a certain distance apart, wearing a mask, those kind of things. So let us move on then. So we just talk about the virus. Let's talk about what happens when somebody gets this virus in their system. There are a number of people who will have no symptoms at all. So they have the virus, they don't know they have it, and they don't get sick. Now, some of these people, it's just before they get sick that they have no symptoms. But some people, and we don't know exactly how many, can have this virus all the way through the course of the infection without getting sick at all. And maybe, we don't know how many percentage, but it may be that there is, 30, 40%. We're not sure. But there's another group of people who will have very mild symptoms. And if you have 100 people that get the virus, about 80 of those will have very mild symptoms. Feel a little bit of flu, they feel unwell, and then after a while they get better and they don't know. Unless they go for a test, they don't know they've had COVID. And the problem is that the people who have no symptoms or very mild symptoms don't know they have COVID, they can spread this virus very easily to other people. And that's why we encourage people to get tested often, because we don't know who will have mild symptoms or no symptoms at all. And then you have the people who go on to develop more severe symptoms. And so really, if again 100 people get this infection, about 14 of them will go on to develop, more severe symptoms. And a number of these, maybe about 5 or so will get very critically ill. end up in the ICU, intensive care unit. And you know, one or two of those are going to die. So this virus is a virus that you have to, really respect, because it can cause death and it can progress very rapidly. People can get sick very, very quickly. Some of the symptoms that people may have, a lot of people initially lose their smell, lose their taste. Some people feel like they have flu, they get fever, chills, they get tired, they may have a little bit of a cough, different things. And then, of course, if it goes on to affect the lungs or the heart or any other organ, they can have those symptoms again. Now, one of the very key things I want to tell you about very quickly is that even people with mild symptoms, when those symptoms get better, they can continue to have effects in the body for a very long time, what we call the long haulers. And they can be tired for a long time, heart disease, lung disease, and of course people who have damage to their lungs. And so sometimes they're not even aware that they have the damage. So the takeaway from this part is that when a virus gets into your body, it takes over the cell, has to live inside of cells, and the prime purpose is to make more copies of itself. And these spread through your body. This is a very personal virus. It spreads from person to person. It loves crowds. If you're in a crowded environment, that virus is going to spread like wildfire and it's going to be happy. If you're not in a crowded environment and you're away from people, that virus is not going to spread the same, and it's going to be sad, right? And it's best to keep it sad. So again, secretions, no symptoms. You can have severe symptoms, and again, long-term effects. The other thing I want to leave with you is that people who get more sick with this virus are the older people over 80 years of age, those with underlying medical conditions. If you have diabetes, high blood pressure, cancer, heart disease, lung disease, anything like that, if your body is suppressed because of treatment that you're getting for conditions, you're at risk of having much more severe disease with COVID, and you can die with COVID. So again, those are the things you have to keep in mind. Now, in children, it's not as bad, but there are children who have died with COVID. Young adults, not as bad, but there are young adults that have died very quickly with COVID as well. So let us get a little pause right there, stick a pin, as we say sometimes, and see what questions you have for that section.
Okay, thank you. Thanks a lot. So yeah, I see that more people are joining us. That's really
Okay.
great. I also got a note from someone saying that they're not able to join yet. But yeah, we just encourage people whenever they're able to join in to do that. And so, yes, we are standing by if there are any questions or if you would like to call in to directly ask your question to Dr. David Haase, or feel free to send it as a text on WhatsApp, and I'm happy to read it out if you would like. In terms of this segment, so far, no questions.
Okay.
But
All right. Let us move on then, because we have a lot of ground and we haven't gotten down the road yet on our bus ride. So the next part of this bus ride, we're going to talk about the immune system. And the immune system, if you want to think about it as the army of the body, this immune system is designed to fight infection. It's a very natural process that your body goes through to fight any infection that comes into your body. There are different parts of it, though. Some of the parts of it are what we call non-specific. So any type of infection, they will get into action, to fight the infection. If you like, they're the foot soldiers. I don't know how many of you like the army or know much about the army. And then there's a part of the immune system that's very, very specific. And this is a part of the immune system that is the main fighter of infection, because what it does is that it develops very specifically to specific infections. And so when COVID gets into your body, this part of your immune system sees it and starts to respond, because that is a part that really does a good job in killing the virus and killing the cells that the virus gets into. The only problem one of the major problems is that that part of the immune system takes a while to develop. It may take 10 to 14 days before it fully develops. And the kind of things that we get from it are called antibodies. There are other things as well, but these antibodies are proteins that are specifically designed to attack the virus, and they get onto that virus and kill that virus. So you can imagine if that virus gets into your body and it takes 10 to 14 days before your body is fully immune, that virus is running rampant. It's producing more and more of itself. So by the time your immune system gets there, gets up to speed, there's so much virus to overcome. The other thing that you should also recognize, one of the things about this virus is that nobody in the world, as far as we know, has immunity to this virus. And so your immune system is not prepared for the virus ahead of time, and so has to start from scratch. Sometimes the immune system is too enthusiastic. It reacts and reacts too much. It overreacts. And in doing so, in trying to get rid of this virus, it can actually damage your own body. And so that can make you severely ill as well. And people who die with this infection oftentimes have a very severe immune response. And so again, the key message here is that your immune system fights infection. There's a specific part of it called antibodies that we, really depend on to really fight infection. And sometimes it overreacts. I'm going to pause here a little bit again, not too long, but see if there are any burning questions, Stacy, that we need to address.
Mhm. Yes, thank you. So yes, I would just remind everyone who's listening that you can send us your questions on WhatsApp at 902-329-9595. Feel free to send a voice message or feel free to send a text through WhatsApp, or if you would like to call in, that's also another option. And so far, let me just have a look to see if there's any questions. No questions for the moment.
Okay. All right. Again, we're going to move on. So when we don't get questions, we feel either everything is all confusing and you don't know what to ask, or you're doing all right and you kind of have an understanding. But we'll summarize things at the very end for you. All right. So let's get back on the bus. This bus is going on a ride. We need to get where we're going, right? So we have a saying, and all of you will know this: prevention is better than cure, right? So if you can prevent something, better than waiting till it happens and then trying to cure it. So how do you protect yourself and other people? Well, you all know the drill, right? You know that you have a toolbox with masks. You wear a mask, right? Make sure it fitted over your nose and mouth properly. Make sure you stay a certain distance away from other people. Wash your hands regularly, and if you don't have soap and water, which is the best, you use the alcohol hand cleansers. And if you are sick, stay away from other people until you get your test. Other things can make you sick as well. But in this day and age, COVID is on top of our minds. So, if you get sick, you need to be tested for COVID and you stay away from others. So the big tool in the toolbox that we need to talk about is the vaccine. And the key thing about vaccines, so there's a principle that vaccines have. All the vaccines that are made are intended to train your body's immune system or your body's defense army to fight an infection. And we're talking about infections. There are other things as well that vaccines are used for, but primarily to fight an infection before the infection comes along. So here's how it works. What they do, and there are lots of different ways of making these vaccines, so we're not going to go through all of them. But the key is that you put either part of the virus or a dead virus or something like that into the body. And so the body will see that. there's no infection going on, but this thing is there. The body will react, develop these immune responses, antibodies. And those antibodies, once they develop, there's a memory in the system, and they always have that potential to develop antibodies. You may not have a lot of them around, but if that infection really comes, a real infection, then those antibodies are produced very rapidly, and they can fight that infection before it actually gets a foothold in your body and can defeat that infection, and so you may never get sick. So that is a crucial thing um, for these antibodies. So your antibodies are there before the the infection comes in. So your body is ready to fight. So the vaccines that we use in Nova Scotia that are approved are called Pfizer, which is a manufacturer of one of them, and Moderna. And these are both what we call mRNA vaccines, messenger RNA. Now, remember earlier I talked about how the cell works and how viruses work. So, what these people have done now, you must remember, people talk about, oh, these are new and all that, but this technology, mRNA technology, has been around for more than 10 years. The thing about it is they didn't know how to use it in vaccines until sort of more recently. I think it was 2005, the first paper, and then 2009. So, you know, 11 years or so ago. But anyway, it's been around for a while, but it's a substance that is very fragile and is destroyed very, very easily by the body. So they had to find a way to make sure it could do its job before it was destroyed by the body. So let me go through how it works. So what they do, so remember the virus, it's genetic material in a bag, and that bag has spikes on the outside of it. All right. And those spikes are what the virus uses to attach to cells and get into cells. So, what they have done with these mRNA vaccines is that they've taken the genetic code for those spike proteins that the virus has, only the spike protein. And they've made that into a vaccine that they can put into a cell, and then that code or recipe for that spike protein is taken to the factory that manufactures proteins in that cell. The factory then produces the spike protein, only the spike protein. And remember, that spike protein is not the virus itself. That spike protein cannot cause infection. That spike protein is then put out from the cell on the surface, and the immune system sees it and right away starts reacting. And so within 10 to 14 days, it develops immunity, antibodies to that spike protein. And so if and when that real coronavirus comes along, the whole virus, and gets into your body is already ready to fight the virus because it's been trained already to fight the virus. And it's been trained without any infection. So you don't have the risk of developing infection and all the different things that can come along with infection. So you don't get sick with infection. So that's a crucial thing for you to recognize, right? So these mRNA, of course, nobody has used them in this way before, but they're not new technology. They can be made much faster than other vaccines, and they're only producing the spike protein. So that little genetic part of the mRNA that gets into the cells is destroyed very, very rapidly. So it doesn't hang around, doesn't go into the headquarters or your head office or the nucleus of the cell or whatever you want to call it. Doesn't affect your cell, the DNA, nothing. It's just destroyed very rapidly, and that's the end of it. So that cell will produce a spike protein for a while, and then it won't produce it anymore. But that's enough to trigger the immune system. Very temporary. Now, the difference is between the two vaccines is that they use slightly different techniques to get this mRNA going. So remember, I said mRNA is very fragile, very easily destroyed. So what they've done to get it going into the cell and to have it, you know, get there to last long enough to do its job is they've coated it with some fat, some tiny, tiny fat particles. And so in the vaccine, the mRNA coated with tiny fat particles, there's some salts and some sugar in there as well. And both vaccines are very, very similar, except for the type of fat they use to coat the mRNA. So again, that's the key thing to remember. However, there are two doses that you need to get to be fully protected. One dose will give you some protection, two doses, full protection, especially against some of the variants. This vaccine, none of these vaccines have eggs, they don't have latex, they don't have any fetal tissue, they don't have any microchips or tracking devices or anything else. All they have in it is what I just told you. So you don't have to worry that there's some other substance in there that, you know, going to affect your body in some way. How come they developed it so quickly? Because, you know, usually take a long time to develop vaccines. But what they did is because there was a worldwide pandemic that was killing a lot of people, they took the steps that they usually take, but instead of doing them one after the other, they did them side by side while they were doing the research on the vaccines, doing them side by side. And rather than waiting until one step is finished, giving that information to the people that look after regulating and approving vaccines, they would just give it to them as they went along. So that information was flowing, they could look at it. So they took all the necessary steps.
Hi, everyone. It looks like Dr. David Haase is perhaps offline. So yeah, we'll just wait a few minutes for him to come back online. And I will just, keep you company while we are waiting. Okay, perfect.
We're offline. Is that we're online again?
We're online again. Perfect.
Okay. All right. So I don't know. Maybe I should repeat what I just said about the vaccine development. So basically, when vaccines are developed, any drugs, they go through several stages, several steps with different numbers of people looking at side effects, how effective they are, those things. What they did with these vaccines is rather than doing one step and then waiting for another step, doing them in sequence, they did them together in parallel. So step one and step two are done together with step three and step four done together. So that made it faster. And then you have the people that look at these vaccines and assess how safe they are and whether the testing was done properly, all that stuff. They all go to the factory and inspect the factory. They fast track that as well. And so that's why these vaccines were developed so quickly. It looks like they were relatively quickly, but they went through all the steps and there were no side effects at all. The one thing I should say to you as well is that when you take these vaccines, it does take 2 to 3 weeks before you have full immunity. So even after you take the vaccine, you still should continue wearing your mask, staying apart from people, and hand washing until public health says that you can do otherwise. So basically, again, vaccines train your immune system. These vaccines train your immune system against a little part of the virus called the spike protein, so that when that virus comes along, your body is ready to roll and is ready and waiting for that to come along so it doesn't cause any effect on you. And the vaccines don't cause infection. So it's kind of a nice way to get protected. All right, we want to pause there. We reach a little rest stop. I'm going to drink some water, see if there are any questions.
Thank you so much. Yes, we do have a question. So the question is, you talked about training, how the vaccine basically trains your immune system to fight against the virus. Can that training hurt your body?
That's a really good question. So the key thing to remember is to go back to what your body does naturally. So if the virus came along, your body would train itself. It would have to train itself because it would see the virus as infection, foreign to your body. It would train itself to develop those antibodies, and those antibodies then would hang around. But already the infection is in your body. This vaccine does the training without the body having to do it on its own and without having to wait for the virus to get into the body. So, no, it does not hurt your body because it's the exact same mechanism that your body uses. All we're doing with the vaccines is giving a small part of the virus so that the body doesn't have to wait for the full virus to come along to be trained. And I hope that is clear. So, it does not hurt your body because it's doing the same thing, just a little bit different way of getting your body trained.
Thank you. And there's another related question.
Okay.
What if the introduction has a negative reaction? Are there measures against that?
The introduction, you're talking about the vaccine. I haven't talked about side effects. So I'm going to do that as we go along. I'll talk a little bit about side effects. But the key thing here is that, and maybe I should just go into, do you have any other questions, Stacy?
Not
All
for
right.
the moment.
All right, so maybe we should just go into that because that's a kind of a good way to get going with a question, because it is a great question, and you need to have the information. Information is power, right? So when you have this information, you can then make up your own mind as to what you want to do with this vaccine. So here's the thing: when you get this vaccine, it's injected into the arm, into the muscle in your upper arm near the shoulder, and you can have different reactions. You can have a local reaction right where it's given. You can get a little bit of soreness. You can get swelling. You can get, other reactions where, you feel generally unwell, a little bit tired. You may have a little bit of a headache. And the key thing, though, about these reactions, they're usually not serious, not severe. So very few people get anything more serious than that. And the nice thing to know is that within 3 to 4 days, those symptoms, those reactions will be gone and they won't come back in that time. The key, though, is that the second dose often produces more severe reactions than the first dose. Some people go through both doses, nothing at all. They don't have any reaction. No, it doesn't mean they're not responding to the vaccine. It's just their body is different. Second dose may give you a little bit more reaction, but again, usually they clear up very, very quickly. Now, you can get other reactions. Some people can get, quite ill. They feel woozy, they feel, just really unwell. Some people have to stay home and rest. One of the key things is make sure you're well hydrated before you go to the vaccine. Drink lots of water, and even afterwards as well. So if you develop any of these reactions that you feel are more serious or more severe, you may need to get help. When you get the vaccine, they'll keep you for about 15 minutes to make sure that you don't get any serious reaction. Some people they keep for half an hour because you can get allergic reactions to the vaccine. Again, very rare, but some people do. And so we need to know whether you're going to have one of those or not. Usually occur quickly after the vaccine. And if anybody is going to have serious side effects, they usually come up within several weeks, of the vaccine. If you feel that you're having something more than you can handle, then you seek medical attention. And yes, there is medication you can take. If you're having a fever or a headache or chills or you feel unwell, you can take something like Tylenol. There are, over-the-counter drugs you can get from your pharmacy that you can use to help you. But again, most people do fairly well and they get better within a couple of days. So again, and there is medication to help with many of these things. And one of the things I should also emphasize, because there's always a question about if I have COVID, should I take this vaccine or can I take this vaccine? Is it safe? Well, it is safe. Basically, the vaccine boosts your immunity to the virus. The problem is if you're in the middle of having a COVID infection and you're having symptoms, you don't want to take the vaccine because if you get side effects from the vaccine, it could be well the same as from COVID. And you're going to mix them up. How are you going to know what's causing what? So it's better to wait until you're better and you're out of isolation, doing well, then you take the vaccine. So it's not safety as such, it's just that the two things you get mixed up if you're not sure what is causing what. And if you're getting really sick and you think it's a vaccine, it could be the COVID. And if you get really, really sick, you should be in hospital. So it's best to stay away. If you're having acute COVID, don't take the vaccine until you're better. All right. So again, we talked about training the immune system. We talked about the side effects of the vaccine. And what I'm going to just end up with here is just a quick summary, basically, and then we'll see if there are any more questions. How are we for time? All right. So the crucial message I want to say to you is the decision that you make to either take the vaccine or not take the vaccine should be based on your knowledge of the good and the bad. So you weigh the risk of getting COVID infection and how bad that could be with the benefits of the vaccine. And the key thing is, and you look at that, yes, the vaccine does have some side effects, usually short lived, boosts your immune system. And even if you've had the COVID, the vaccine is useful because we feel that it will give you a longer period of immunity. And so it will be more useful over a long term. Now, we haven't talked about these variants, and maybe I should talk about them just a little bit before we finish. The key thing about the variants is that it's the same virus, same COVID virus, but as all of these viruses do, because they're reproducing themselves, making copies of themselves, mistakes can be made when they make copies. And so you can get variations in parts of the virus. The thing about it, a lot of these variations are negative variations for the virus because they do not allow the virus to survive. Some of the variations in parts of the virus are better for the virus. They make it more easy to stay alive and to copy itself and to go from person to person. And so, guess what? That virus is going to have an advantage over the other viruses and will become the major virus strain that we see. And that's what's happening now. We have some variants that were detected in different parts of the world initially, and they have names, Delta, and all that stuff, but don't worry about the names. But the key thing is the spike protein has changed in some of these. It makes it more easy to get into cells, makes it more dangerous that when it gets into cells, it causes more damage. It makes it that it can make more copies and so can transmit more easily from person to person. So it's easier to catch, more deadly. And so, again, you need to be aware of these variants because you need to get both doses of the vaccine. And in the future, we may need to get booster doses of these vaccines. We may need to get a vaccine shot every year, like the flu shot, because of these variants. But we don't know right now. Time will tell what we'll need to do. But again, just to be aware of those. All right, we reached a destination. We're going to wrap up now. We're going to look back at the bus ride. We started out with the virus, and we talked about how viruses operate. Two purposes in life for viruses: get into cells. It's survival, right? Get into cells and produce more copies of themselves. That's what viruses do. And this coronavirus is no different. Gets into your cells in the respiratory tract, in your breathing passages, produces more virus, goes on to other parts of your body, and then it can also pass on person to person. So just remember, person to person, very personal virus, right? That's how it's passed on from person to person. It causes symptoms in most people. A lot of people don't have symptoms. Some of them develop later on. We don't know how many truly go without symptoms all the way through. Some of the people, some people go on to get very critically ill, and some people may die. And that's a big problem. All these vaccines, although the vaccine may not prevent the virus from getting into your body, it will help to protect you from severe infection and from death. They're shown very clearly to be very effective against severe infection and death. And in fact, there's more information coming that these two vaccines that we have also help your body to produce less virus so you don't pass on the infection to other people. And they may eventually show that they protect you from getting the infection as well. So we looked at the virus, we looked at how your immune system works. Your immune system, the army that fights infection, needs certain things and specific things called antibodies to fight infection. And then we looked at how the vaccines, these mRNA vaccines, work. They put a little code for a little part of the virus into cells, produce that part of the virus only, no complete virus, just that part, and that mRNA is destroyed completely in no time at all. That spike protein is then recognized by your immune system, responds, produces antibodies, and when that coronavirus comes knocking at the door, man, your body's army is ready to fight. No, you're not coming into my house, right? It's ready to fight. So again, variants are here. We may get more because as long as the virus keeps spreading among people, that's when it causes the variants. The more it makes copies, the more you get variants. And so again, I'm going to stop there. I hope everything I said was fairly clear. Ask your questions, please, and we can follow up later on if you have anything you don't think of asking right now. So again, thank you for having me on. I am very, very pleased to be able to do this for my Jamaicans and others as well. And just God bless and keep you all. And the work you do is very valuable, so we want to make sure you are protected. Take care.
Mhm.
Walk good, my friends.
Thank you. Thanks so much.
You're welcome.
And yeah, I'm gonna put another call in case you have questions. Feel free to send us a message at 902-329-9595. There may be people who just joined a bit later. So yes, we invite you to send your questions to us. And feel free to call in if you would like as well to pose your question directly. I see that I got a message now. I'm going to see if this message is a question. Okay, yes. Okay, I got this question. It's more of a comment, but I will share it.
Sure.
Immigration might not be available to get a shot each year like the flu shot. Yes, so yeah, it was more of a comment
Yeah.
than a question.
Well, I can comment on that as well because right now, it's speculation. We do not know if you're going to need a shot every year like the flu shot. But if you're a farm, you're one of the migrant workers that you come up to work on farms every year in Nova Scotia, for instance, and you get your vaccine this year, like now, then when you come up, I'm sure they'll arrange for you to get a yearly shot if you need it. But you can also get it in Jamaica as well. Jamaica has vaccines as well, and so you may be able to get it before you come up. But again, we don't know for sure. It may be. We're just saying maybe. We don't know for sure.
Yes, thank you so much, Dr. Haase. And yeah, maybe if it's okay, I know a few people asked me some questions, and
Yeah,
maybe it
sure.
wasn't covered yet. So I'll just ask you if that's okay.
Yeah.
Some questions that I've received from workers. So there's some workers that are concerned about blood clotting and the vaccines. Could you share with
Speak
us?
to that. Yes.
Mhm.
So the blood clotting with the vaccines really has come up with two vaccines. One is called AstraZeneca, and the other one is called the Johnson and Johnson. So none of these two vaccines that we use here, mRNA vaccines, Moderna and Pfizer, are associated with blood clotting. Now we do have AstraZeneca here in Nova Scotia, and there are people who have had that vaccine and have done well, and they may well want to go for the second shot with AstraZeneca, but they're being encouraged to go for an mRNA with the second shot. The balance, remember I said it's a balance between good and bad, so the risks of getting COVID versus the benefits of the vaccine. The thing you need to know as well is that people who have severe COVID infection are prone to get blood clotting as well. So that is a major issue with COVID infection, the blood clots. And so again, that is something you have to be aware of. But the mRNA vaccines are not associated with blood clotting.
Thank you. Thanks so much for clarifying that. And there was a question also. If your immune system is already strong, will it cause any harm to take the vaccine, or why to get the vaccine?
Good question. You guys are having some good questions. So again, back to what I said about the fact that this is a very new virus. And the reason, one of the big reasons that this virus spreads so quickly around the world, because if you think about it, December it was first detected, and then by March it was in over 180 countries all around the world.
Okay, looks like we left Dr. David Haase offline, so we'll just wait a few moments for him to come back on. There you are.
We are okay. So if
Yes.
we think about influenza, the virus changes every year, but many of us who live long enough have seen some of the viruses already and have some immunity. So we have already seen it. So when that virus, sort of comes along, that particular virus type, we can respond and we can protect ourselves. This virus is totally new. Nobody has any immunity. So even if your immune system is the strongest immune system in the world, it will not protect you against this virus because your immune system has never seen this virus before. And that's what you need. Your immune system has to see the virus, then develop the immunity, and then if the virus comes along again, it can protect you. So that's the key to remember, is that if you have never seen the infection before, you have no immunity against it. Now, the other thing too, as I'm talking about immunity, people who have low immune systems, either from underlying disease like cancer or even drug treatment, it is recommended that you take these vaccines. Your system may not respond as well, but without the vaccine, you're going to have the risk of really bad infection if you get it. So no, you need it. Even if your immune system is strong, you need the vaccine.
Mhm. And there was a related question that you did touch on. And the question was, what if someone has an underlying health condition? Should they get the vaccine? And specifically, I got these questions from someone with a high blood pressure and someone who had another infection, non-COVID, and they wondered if they should get the vaccine.
And the answer to that, the short answer is yes, because again, with underlying medical conditions, you're at much higher risk of having a severe outcome with COVID infection. So, diabetes, high blood pressure, heart disease, anything else. if you get COVID, then you may do worse than if you did not have those underlying conditions. Now, the thing about if you have another type of infection, so you could get the vaccine, but I would say if you have your body fighting an acute infection already, I would get that treated and make sure that that is settled before you put anything else on that. Because again, when you take the vaccine, if you have any side effects, you're going to worry, is it because of the vaccine or is it because of this infection getting worse? And so you want to make sure the infection is cleared up first before you go and take any of the vaccines. So that would be my advice.
Thank you so much. That's really helpful. And a question that I often get is the vaccine mandatory? Could you, share?
So again, very good question. Very good question. Right now, the vaccine, so in Nova Scotia and Canada, all around the world, the vaccine is not mandatory, especially for, people who are going back and forth and all that stuff. However, you ought to know that people are talking a lot about something called a vaccine passport. And also, people are saying that in certain occupations and businesses and those kind of things, the employer may have the right to set certain standards for people working with them to protect their other workers. So, again, it's not mandatory right now. Nobody can really force you to take this if you don't want to take it. But just be aware that if there are standards in your workplace, if there are policies that say to protect us and to protect the other workers, we require a vaccine, then that may come into play. For instance, flying on an aircraft, just give me a second. Just flying on an aircraft, you're in a crowded setting, right? Close together. The airlines may say, we're not going to let anybody on this aircraft unless you can show us proof that you have been vaccinated. So, again, that may be a situation you run into. Please remember, though, keep it in context. If I'm traveling to a country where there's yellow fever, or a country where I may have a risk of developing, something like hepatitis, or some other things. Those countries may require that I show them proof that I've had a vaccine against those infections. Or even coming back to Canada, they may say, oh, you've been to a country where this infection is. Can you show us that you've been vaccinated and all? So COVID-19 is a different kind of ball game, if you will. But keep in mind that there are other vaccines that are required vaccines for travel, even in school settings, even in some provinces and states and all that. There are vaccines that children need to have to protect themselves and others. And there are some schools that if the children haven't had those vaccines, then it's a little bit of difficulty with them going. So again, I just want to make the point that mandatory sounds like they're forcing you, but nobody's going to hold you down and vaccinate you. You do have a choice. However, depending on your workplace, that choice may prevent you from going on a plane or doing a particular, anyway, but you get my point. So right now, there's nobody saying these are mandatory as such, but, they may become a requirement.
Yeah, thank you so much. And on that point, also, I would say, if it were to become a requirement for specific jobs, people would be and should be let know before before they
Exactly.
sign on,
Yeah.
so that they can make a decision around that. But like we've heard with some workers, um, you know, um, being threatened to be sent back to their home country or not being called back again in the future. And that no one should be coercing anyone or threatening someone that if they don't get the vaccine, then something is going to happen. But yes, we don't know what's going to happen in the future in terms of if it will become mandatory for travel, for example. So that's something that,
Yeah.
just
And if I may add a comment as well, personally, my approach is to encourage, right? Give you the knowledge, give you the information, and encourage you to take the vaccine because it's protecting your community, your other people around your family, your friends, and yourself. And this virus that's going around with the pandemic, the vaccine is a major, major thing in stopping the pandemic. So it should be encouraged. And I agree totally, Stacey, with what you said, is that it shouldn't be coming out of the blue. If it's going to be a requirement, you need to know ahead of time so you can make your plans. And if you decide that not for you, then that's your decision. But I agree, it shouldn't be a big club over your head to say, boy, if you don't do this, I go and do this. But anyway, yeah.
thank you. Appreciate hearing your reflections. And maybe I guess one thing that that people have asked, this non-medical question, but I'll just bring it up, is people will sometimes ask me, will I get a confirmation or proof that I got the
Yeah.
vaccine? Does my name go into a database saying that I got the vaccine? So yeah, maybe just sharing from my
Well, from my perspective, and then you have your perspective
sounds
as
good.
well.
Yes, go
Yeah,
ahead.
so the vaccines, all the vaccines in Nova Scotia are managed through public health. And what public health does is they have a registry, a vaccine registry, where everybody who gets even the flu shot, you're registered in that. So they do have a record of you getting the vaccine. The problem, though, that you may run into is that record may not be readily accessible when you need it, right? So if you're traveling from Jamaica to Nova Scotia and your vaccine record is in Nova Scotia, that's not going to help you. So you actually need a piece of paper that you can carry on with you. And there are people who have developed apps that you can have in your smartphone as well that you can put your vaccine record in. And Stacey, I know you had something you were kind of saying about that, so I'll leave you to comment on the other piece.
Okay, thank you. Yes. So, in terms of usually when you get your vaccine here in Nova Scotia, you've been, many people have been. Usually, what would happen is that you would get an email with your vaccine, your immunization record, and you would put the last digits of your health card and you would be able to access it. But with migrant workers, it's a bit different. And so I know a lot of people don't have emails. Maybe someone else booked your vaccine for you. And also, even recently, I went with some workers to help them get their vaccine, and they didn't get the email. But when they were getting their vaccine, they requested a piece of paper saying that confirming that they got the vaccine. And so I just encourage people to take a picture of it, so that you have that copy in your phone saved just in case. So yeah, just you can still get that record, because I know it could be important in the future to show that you did get the vaccine, but there is also a record as well, as Dr. David Haase mentioned. And we have a comment from someone here. Well, we have a few comments, and I'll read the most recent comment. So Marvette says, I really believe that if someone don't take the vaccine, they won't be able to come back in Canada to work. What if you take the vaccine and can't work for some days? Should we get paid by our boss for those we don't attend work?
Yeah. So yeah, I am not familiar with the policies of your workplace, and it totally depends on the policies of your workplace. Some places will make allowance for vaccine reactions and give you time to take the vaccine, and if you're unwell and you need to stay home afterwards, they will cover that. But again, I'm not sure in this situation what the policies are. So, Stacy, you may probably have more than I do.
Mhm. Yeah, that's I think a really good question, and I would say, yeah, I have seen in some cases, as Dr. David Haase mentioned, I think it depends on the workplace. I know in one case of some workers who did get the vaccine, and their boss gave them the day off, but I don't hear that too often. And so, yes, that's something that I would mention in terms of the specific question. And also, I would encourage you to tune into. We have a workshop next week around migrant worker rights and COVID-19. It will likely be 8 p.m. same time next week. And so we just encourage you, and I can share more information about that workshop at the end as we're wrapping up. Thank you.
Anything else there?
Oh, so yes, I'm just going to once again just put a plug in. If you would like to ask a question, feel free to send us a message on WhatsApp, or feel free to call us on WhatsApp, and we can either read out your question, or you can also directly call in and ask your question. So just this is a great time to get any questions answered. If you have any doubts that you would like to get more information around, this is a great opportunity to do that.
And so while we're waiting, I want to say one other thing as well. Remember, I talked about knowledge is power. And one of the things you need to all be aware of is be careful where you get your knowledge from. When you go to the internet, there are so many sources of information about COVID-19 and about the vaccines. And I'm not going to go through what's out there. You know what's out there because I'm sure you've all been looking. But just be careful. Make sure you go to places that are legitimate. Centers for Disease Control, and I can, give a couple of links. I can send them to Stacy, and she can send them out to you. Centers for Disease Control, Health Canada, Nova Scotia government has an excellent website with information about coronavirus and the vaccine, and links from there as well. And the key thing about the Nova Scotia website, I like that because they will tell you where, they will give you the numbers, they will tell you where there are potential exposures. So if you've been out shopping, you want to keep check on that because there are supermarkets and all that where people are getting exposed. And so you need to know. But anyway, I'll send a couple of those to you, Stacy, and you can send them out. But just be aware that you want to make sure your sources of knowledge and information are appropriate and accurate.
Yes, thank you. Thanks so much. And I also just want to say, I know a few people have sent me videos of what information is going around, and yeah, definitely appreciate that. I think it's helpful to know what information is being shared, and we are also sharing an informed perspective around the vaccine. And so we encourage you to share this video as well with others who are considering getting the vaccine, may have questions about the vaccine. So yeah, just want to mention that this link is going to be, the recording will be available in the same place where where you're tuning in today. And so yeah, I think it'll be a good resource for others. And I know some people maybe weren't able to join us tonight, but will also be able to watch. And if you have any follow-up questions, feel free to share them. And thank you for the comments as well. So I'll read this comment from Marvette. Thank you, Doctor, for the information. It was really informative. I learned a lot. So
Thank
that's
you.
what.
I'm happy about that. Yeah, happy about that. Okay, great.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so yeah, with that, I think we will, definitely wrap up. And so I have an announcement for this event coming up next week. So yes, as I mentioned, the workshop next week is going to be focused on migrant worker rights and COVID-19. And that's going to be next Tuesday, June 29th, and that will likely be at 8 p.m. And the topics that will be covered are payment during the 14-day isolation period, including employer requirements, the Canada Recovery Sickness Benefit, and eligibility, how you can apply. There's a program for Nova Scotia sick day reimbursement. So we're going to go over that's for anyways, that's something that was recently announced here in Nova Scotia. And we're going to talk about just eligibility, the process for applying, and just to give information to workers around whether that might apply in your case. And I'm just seeing this pop up here. I'm just going to close this. Sorry, just one moment. Okay, so yes, and also any other questions around your rights and around the vaccine. We're going to go more into that next week, and we're going to have a speaker, Donardo, who is going to be sharing this workshop in Patois. So we're excited to have this workshop next week as well, and to answer any questions that you might have around your rights in the COVID-19 context as workers. So yes, that's we'll be sharing more information around that. And also, in closing, we also encourage you to feel free to share your questions. If they come up after, feel free to send them also to us on WhatsApp, and I will reach out to Dr. Haase to get answers to your questions. And just want to say thank you so much, Dr. Haase, for joining us. This has been really, really a really great session.
You're so welcome, and thank you for inviting me. And as you said, people would like to send questions. We'll be happy to answer them.
Okay, perfect. So with that, we're going to say good night to everyone. Thank you for joining us.